So, in our main topic today here on Mastering Dungeons, we are going to look at the best of the old adventure against the giants. This AD&D adventure was the precursor to the adventure we covered a couple weeks ago, the 5e adventure, Storm King's Thunder. So, as is our wont, we're going to go back and we are going to look at the adventures that inspired the new adventures. Other adventures did inspire, or other articles did inspire Storm King's Thunder, but at its heart, this Against the Giants is one of the core AD&D adventures. If you rated or asked players from back then, give me a list of the adventures that you remember the most, Against the Giants is going to be high on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a classic in every way. And I think the product history has shown that because we keep going to the well of Against the Giants over and over again. It's the kind of adventure that it's classic. And then when you think about how highly it's rated and all of its history, you go, yeah, okay, it really is significant. We really do keep coming back to it. It's such a classic and yeah, amazing.
So before we start, disclaimer, we know that this adventure and the other older adventures that we talk about, or even the new adventures that we talk about, are not perfect. In fact, some of them we may not even really like all that much, or we wouldn't even consider good by our standards. But in this series, we're going to focus on the positives. We're going to look at what we liked about these adventures, as well as what lessons we might learn from them. We are going to do our best to keep it positive.
Yeah. And I think disclaimer wise, I'm going to get out of the way here. In reading Against the Giants this last, 2 weeks, I had forgotten how sexist this series is.
Oh, yeah.
It's a deep, world-drenching level of males are better than women in this whole series. It's a whole through line. This is written by Gary Gygax. Famously, there have been a number of incidents where he discussed how he saw, differences in gender in the game. And this just reinforces it constantly over and over again. So you may, it's a cautionary tale of reading it where you're going to have to work through these things in what was seen back then as sort of a necessary way of representing what the author and other associates saw as nature in this fantasy world, which is a very weird stance. And so there's just a lot there. And be aware that if you decide to go back and look at this classic, there are some things that really haven't aged well. And so I personally would recommend the later versions where a lot of this stuff has been taken out and all of the fun remains.
And speaking of the later versions, let's look at a brief history of this. So Against the Giants was written by Gary Gygax and published in 1981 for AD&D. It is a compilation that pulls together 3 independent adventure modules that were coded G1 to G3. G1 being Steading of the Hill Giant Chief, G2 being Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl, and G3 being Hall of the Fire Giant King. All of those published previously and separately in 1978. Steading of the Hill Giant was the first adventure module ever published by TSR. So there's a trivia question for you. Yeah. What was the first one published? It was Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. Hall of the Fire Giant King is the first time that a stat block for the Drow Elf appeared. Mm-hmm. And all 3 adventures were tournament adventures appearing at Origins 4 all the way back in 1978.
Yeah, and in 1986, these adventures are all pulled together. You already have, this is a compilation that we're talking about of the 3 original ones, the mono adventures. Now it gets pulled into, in 1986, Queen of the Spiders that I'm holding up, this mega module that features Lolth on the cover. And that wraps the entire storyline together of the G series, the D series, the Q series, all into one giant But there have been many, many homages to this classic adventure, including celebrating the 25th anniversary of TSR in 1999 against the Giants, The Liberation of Jeff. This book, which I'm holding up, it includes the original, and then they add this large section that talks all about the Duchy of Jeff and its state and various things that are happening throughout the land of Jeff in Greyhawk. Some of which could then be used in the third edition organized play campaign, but some things which couldn't because they were not as great as written. But a lot of fodder there that was written by Shawn K. Reynolds. There was a novel in 1999, Shawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The 4E had the 2009 adventure Revenge of the Giants. There you go. Influenced by and an homage to Against the Giants. 4E also had in 2012 Chris Perkins releasing the originals in a 4E version for Dungeon Magazine as part of D&D Insider, including a new edition that he created called Warrens of the Stone Giant Thane.
Very cool.
Yeah. And we go right into 5E, and the very first cover of the very first book is the player's handbook, and on there we get King Snur as the cover art. I did a winter fantasy conversion of Steading. 5e republished the series in full in Tales of the Yawning Portal, and the series is followed by D1 through D3, which deal with the Drow, and culminates with Q1, Queen of the Demon Web Pits. So as we go forward, we are going to spoil this adventure. So, we apologize for, a 45 or whatever year old adventure that we are about to spoil, but here we go.
Yep.
What is best of this adventure? Let's talk first about the premise and the approach that it takes. Teos, lead us off.
Storm King's Thunder, we talked about the appeal of giants, and this adventure, it taps into that. The old TV shows of the era, cool stories, right? Any number of fables and things like that. Giants loom large in our imagination even before this adventure exists, and it taps into that with this idea of enormous, gigantic foes coming across the land. And the concept is very simple in a number of ways, and maybe it's that simplicity that delivers. Story-wise, it's the idea that giants have been raiding the lands. And while these are ostensibly in Greyhawk, boy, there's no Greyhawk content in these things. Mm-hmm. Nations aren't mentioned. Later, they're mentioned in the second edition versions. But it's just the lands are being attacked by giants. And what's different is the giants are working together, right? You might see hill and stone and frost, fire working together, which isn't normal. And so under penalty of death, you are hired by the nations to go and figure out what happens. Don't come back unless you want to be killed or you have the answer. And so you go off to figure out, why are they working together? Very simple question. And the premise is very simple niche adventure. Go through a dungeon crawl in areas packed with giants. Usually the first level is very giantish, and then any other levels are more like also underground, some giant, some other things. So you get a little bit of mix, and it's not just giant all the time, which is very clever. And there's not a lot of page count here, Shawn.
No, the first adventure when it was released, the Steading, was 8 pages. So was the Glacial Rift adventure for the Frost Giants. Then the Fire Giant King, we decided to splurge, and we made that one 16 pages.
16.
So the 3 adventures together formed what we might think of as a typical adventure modules type thing. Mm-hmm. How could they get away with doing a full adventure in only 8 pages? Well, lots of reasons. Rooms could be very easily and quickly described. Monster stats were just one line. So it would just say, "Hey, oh, there are 24 hill giants in this room," and that would be it. Uh, there was, but then when something special came up, you might get half a page or a full page of just describing all of the intricacies of that one room.
Yeah.
And the formatting was such that there is no formatting. Well, I shouldn't say no formatting, but there are some bold, there's some italic, but for the most part, it is just a box of text and not a text box.
This is an era before word processing software, right?
Oh, yeah.
Paste ups, this is all being pasted up. It's like if you ever worked yearbook in our era, you know what that's like.
Yeah. So you could have hours and hours worth of play on half a column. And for better or for worse, these adventures are very hard to parse. But as we will talk about, in order to make this fun for your group, you really needed to do a lot of work as the game master. And a lot of game masters back in the day learned to become great story facilitators and imaginative creators because the adventures that we were running, even the published adventures, both gave us room, but also forced us to become creators ourselves.
Yeah, and there are things in these adventures that for sure are great, are fun, and why say OSR or people who favor older editions will come back to this as and hold it up as a classic. Elements like of the dungeon crawl and what can be rewarding play, the idea of being cautious and using stealth, playing a long game, getting what you need and get out, right? Those kinds of things. You see that especially in this first adventure a lot. Think concepts like Jaquazing the dungeon, right? Where you have several entrances, at least more than one, and lots of ways to go. And we'll see that in things like the map of this first adventure. There are many ways you could end up. And I think I said in the notes at one point, like, I remember thinking like, wow, you could run this adventure 5 times the Steading, and it could go 5 very different ways based on which paths they choose and whether an alarm is raised and so on. It's interesting.
Yeah. It's important to go a little deeper here. The earliest D&D gameplay was often focused on survival and treasure over stories. That doesn't mean you couldn't create stories or there wasn't a germ of a story in the adventure, but the plot tended to be very simple. Go into the dungeon or some other area, deal with the enemies, get as much treasure as you possibly can, and then get out. Because treasure equaled XP, XP equaled levels, and you did not get a lot of XP for defeating monsters. So if you could sneak in, if you could trick your way in, if you could get in, grab a whole bunch of treasure and get out before even being noticed, you're gaining levels, you're becoming more powerful, and then when you go back in, you have even more resources at your disposal. So when we look at adventures like this, you have to keep in mind that's why they were written. That's why there's 10,000 gold pieces worth of things just sitting in one room, basically unguarded from time to time.
There is so much treasure in these adventures. I always laugh at that because it's all XP, but unbelievable amounts. Also in these adventures, it's important to recognize that these were fickle, the way they're written is not consistent in their intent and reward. So the gameplay is random at times, right? You might find a chute that if you go into it, oh, that's the secret way into the treasure room. And so what a brilliant explorer you are. The next one, you go into the chute, well, it leads to the greased area where they dispose of their garbage. And once you have fallen far enough, it's impossible to get out and your character's dead. There are a number of parts where it just says, like there's a temple in the fire giant area. When you first activate it, the closest creature just is dead.
Yeah, and don't spoil the end.
All right,
don't spoil the end. But when
it's
Teos said
it's a fickle thing, right? It's just cuz sometimes.
Yeah. This was really early in the game's history, and what game masters would do and what the designers would do is they put the rules out in front of people and they watched how they reacted.
Yeah.
Oh, I listen at every door, or I do this same tactic which is optimized over and over again. So what the designers would do is say, okay, everyone is doing this tactic, so we are going to put in a counter to that tactic that will be a horrible consequence for doing the thing that they always do. Right. And then it becomes, oh, you're looking for a shortcut into the next level down, which has better treasure. We will punish you for seeking that. Yeah. So what Teos says is absolutely right. And when he says you fell through the chute and your character dies, he doesn't mean that they could die. He doesn't mean that if they roll badly, they die. He means is the adventure says if they fall down the chute, the character's dead. And that's it. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's a great part in the last adventure that suddenly, Gygax talks to the DM and says, "Hey, this is the third adventure. Get serious." And really underscores, we can go on that in greater detail later, but it really underscores that the view of DM as referee and judge, impartiality, let the chips fall as they may. It's not that it has to be adversarial, though you can read this and see absolutely why we wrestled with adversarial DMs during those days. But it's definitely not today's DM of viewed as you're facilitating this great story. You're on their side. You're cheering them on. You, of course, have to do some things to represent the reality of the world, but you're cheering them on, right? And things like Mike Shea's dials of, well, maybe this adventure is too hard. Let's dial it a bit, right? No.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, like the games that have come from D&D, like Dungeon World, one of the tenets is be a fan of the characters, right? Yeah. And we did not get that back in the day. And one more thing to note, like most adventures of this time, these are meant to be played by very large parties. You might have 9, 10, 12, 14 players playing characters at the table. Dying was sort of expected. And if your character died, you would just maybe make up a new character, maybe play a retainer that your character had. And you might even start at first level and be going along with these 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th level characters and just stay in the back and protect yourself and get rewarded. And soon you will catch up to us because of the way experience is handled.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the introduction to the entire 3 adventure set. We get a simple introduction with writing that's hard to parse, for sure, as to what is DM information versus player intro. Like I said, that text is just a wall of text, and it may jump from the monsters you see to the environment to the trap, back to the monsters, then to a sentence on the history of the area. It was all over the place.
Yeah.
What else do we learn from the introduction here, Teos?
So, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but the basic concept is, hey, figure out why these giants are coordinating their attacks. We happen to know exactly where there's this steading of hill giants. So that's a great place. Go there and check. And if you don't come back with the answer and you come back, we will execute you. So don't come back until you have the answer. And that is, again, one of those things that's just story level handling, right? Where the DM is going to say, nope, you're dead then. So as a player, I got to go do this. You are given one thing that's nice is you're given a map. These maps that you're given never actually have a version. There's no handout of them. But the map has information on it. Here's the steading. And also, look, there's a little cave where you can hide. And every one of the adventures has something like this. And that's a place where you can rest. And of course, the giants could respond to attacks in a number of ways. Sometimes we're given a lot of info, sometimes very little. But in all of them, it says, if they don't at least take some precaution in leaving to go to this cave, eventually they're followed. And even at the end, there's a % chance, no matter what you do, cumulative chance that with every foray, some giants will find out where you're going and come after you. So it's not 100% safe, but it gets less safe as you go. And it is the idea that you are going to sometimes need to come out and rest. We can remember that in AD&D, resting could take weeks.
Mm-hmm. We need to say here that back in AD&D times, the rules were a little bit more convoluted, sometimes missing completely, sometimes hard to understand, sometimes contradictory. And there wasn't this idea of make a skill check. There wasn't this idea
Right.
of try to solve things through die rolls. It was, what do you, the player, want to do to get past this situation?
Yeah.
And for probably some good reasons, that play style has changed over the years. One of the reasons being it can be more difficult to be a DM in situations where the players are frustrated, the players are either missing information or they're just not thinking of the right thing, and play becomes tedious or antagonistic because of it.
Yeah.
And so the evolution of the game has gone many steps toward rectifying that situation. But there's still some joy in this idea of think outside your character sheet, think away from the dice, put yourself there. What do you do to learn, to overcome? And we're going to see a lot of this as we talk about the adventure.
And it's where that rulings, not rules type of thinking comes up. It's things like, when you're, we talked about when we reviewed the 5th edition player's handbook, does equipment even matter anymore? Like we all get this huge kit of stuff, but you never really need it because every encounter is sort of written so that it just works as is. You don't need a rope or a staff, and everybody has a rope anyway. Here, those things matter because your character sheet has so little on it, and your abilities are often very limited. Spell slots are something to hoard, protect, use very carefully. Hit points are precious. And so if you can figure out how to use a mirror to help you, you will, right? And a staff and a rope and a 10-foot pole, all these things. And so it creates that kind of interesting play. But also, there were a lot of times when I remember hours that we would spend testing things that yielded nothing because the rooms are fine or empty or whatever. And you would just take all these cautions. And so there are some times when I'm very thankful that we can just make a check. But there were no skills, as you said, back then. Yeah. So that all impacts this gameplay.
So let's talk about the adventure structure. At the grand level, each adventure is part of this Greyhawk's wheels within wheels concept. The players see the threat, the giants. They are told to go to the first place where the hill giants live and investigate. You learn that behind the hill giants are the frost giants. So you explore there, and then you learn, wait, there are fire giants involved. You investigate the fire giants, and then you learn that there are drow involved. So, and then that leads into a whole drow-based adventure and then a Louth-based adventure. Each adventure gives you one type of giant at a dungeon-like location with maybe 2 levels, maybe 3 levels. The locations go from sort of typical, oh, look, it's a fort that house these giants. Oh, but wait, there's this strange area underneath. And we get that in all 3 adventures. Each adventure reveals and then actually gives you a way to easily get to the next adventure. And the cover says that this will be for levels 8 through 12. In the first intro, it says the ideal party is 9 characters, with an average of at least 9 levels. So imagine that. The suggestion is 9 characters with at least 9 levels.
I remember back in the day debating, the cover would say 8 to 12, and we would be like, well, can we be 12th? And the DM would be like, I don't think so. No. And you're like, are you sure? And then you'd read a text like this. You'd be like, well, that one says we should be average 9th. So 8 to 12, 9. I mean, we should be a few levels in, right? And they're like, well then why would it say 8? And just hilarity would ensue, right? Just hours of discussing and while we munched on popcorn or Cheetos.
Exactly. All right, so let's touch really quickly on each of these individual adventures. So let's talk about the best of what's in the Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. Teos, what you got?
I mean, the first part is this is a beautiful way of introducing the situation for the very first one. The guards are asleep or dozing. There is a party going on in the central area, so there's a lot of noise. There are rooms where you're told nobody will respond to noise from this room. So there are a lot of opportunities to sneak around. And so it sets up that play to not just be like stab everything endlessly, but be judicious. And that's very smart. There are some funny things like, you go up to the guard tower and there are 2 guards that are sleeping. And it says no matter kind of how great your plan is, there's a 1 in 20 chance that even a great scheme to kill the 2 sleeping guards will fail. Okay. But it's very interesting. You get these choices, right? There's a back door. There is, all these meandering corridors that you might go to that really change up the experience and give this Gygaxian type experience of which way do I want to go? What do I want to explore? But wow, the number of giants, right, is so different than what we're used to in most of our days, in most of 5e type content. The big hall actually leads directly into that entrance area. So you could go straight in. Now there is a shrouded area. So you might open the door and go, oh man, that looks brutal, and back out and probably not be spotted. But the big hall at the end of this has King Nasra, his wife, the sub-chief, a visiting group of 1 cloud giant and 3 stone giants, 22 hill giants, 22. 8 ogres, and the chief's cave bear pit under his table. And the wealth in here, because as you said, XP comes from gold more than killing, averaged out, when I did the math, 75,000 gold pieces. Welcome to Gygaxian treasure hoards.
Yeah. There is even more from the era. There is a room with 12 giant children who basically, this says, the rules say treat them as ogres. So if the players make a lot of noise outside of this main hall with all of these creatures, the creatures in there, the giants, are just like, oh, it's just the kids being rambunctious, right? As you characters are like stabbing things in the hallway outside. And so, these days we're not so big on the murdering of children, even if they are, monstrous. But this shows the importance of imagination and sort of weird plans over tactical gameplay in adventures back then. The adventure literally suggests that the characters might disguise themselves as the giant youngsters in order to move through the steading without getting attacked at every turn. So, you 2 halflings in a trench coat, equals 1 hill giant child, apparently. But that's how the adventure assumes that this might be a tactic that the characters will take. And back then, the characters probably would have tried to come up with something that would allow them to do that.
Yeah, there's some interesting things too. Very AD&D, these concepts that we bought into from the early days of like, if this, then that, but if you did the other thing, then now a different. So there is a guard room with a horn to call 14 dire wolves. They're in another room. And if you go there first, they will both howl and immediately bite you, unless you picked up the whip from another room and they're now afraid that you're their handler because they're used to this. So then they will just, quietly sit there, staring at you. It's just all those very interesting circumstantial bits that I think really got us thinking, and as early, DMs, and started us thinking, well, I can take that idea and work with it, right? And do these sort of causal things and rewarding choices and decisions. The dungeon level has just a million interesting things for their era. Prisons, bugbears who serve the giants, stone giant miners, orcs who are rebels in hiding, a weird abandoned temple, the chief's hidden treasure room, cavern areas with troglodytes and lizards and carrion crawlers. And if you want to do the whole thing, you would have to have decided to plunge into an underwater river, because, gee, why wouldn't you do that? To then get to the other area. But plunge into any other underwater river and you're dead. But, that's where you can get to the area with all the carrion crawlers, I think it is. The chief's treasure room is the real key, which is interesting because it's hidden, talking about gating your things behind success, or success behind gates. But you must get to this treasure room, and there you'll find the map to the next adventure, along with a strange obsidian box with a chain of black metal and instructions in Hill Giant on a sheet of human skin. You should loop the chain in a figure 8, and if you do, you can somewhat stand in it or something, I don't know, while holding the map, and it transports up to 6 persons in each circle to the Glacial Rift.
So that brings us to the next adventure, the best of the Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. And again, we're told that if played as a series, any undefeated giants from the previous adventure will come to this location. So if you didn't, if you killed some but not all to sneak through, that's okay. But if you got through the entire thing and only used stealth or trickery, and you took the shortcuts and you got through and you found the map and off you go to the next place, you're going to be seeing all of the foes that you did not fight in the next adventure.
And that's another real different thing about those days, is that a lot of it was attrition, right? Being worn down over time by combat. So facing 20 hill giants when you're higher level isn't seen as boring. It's seen as wearing you down and forcing you to make hard choices around your resources, right?
Yeah. So the PCs arrive on the edge of a glacier with various paths, and you can decide to enter on the upper or the lower level. So there are borders that block some of the areas, and it takes a whole paragraph to go through all of the old style mechanics of how that they might be opened. And Teos is holding up the map, and it is a labyrinth.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, it's the kind of thing where it takes you a few minutes to even figure out how the maps correlate to the text.
Yeah.
Because they don't, the numbers are reused every time. So you're like, area 1. Oh, this is clearly the area 1 you're talking about. You keep going and you're like, well, let me jump ahead to the next session. Oh, no, actually, it was the other map. Okay.
The other area 1. Yeah. So what else do we get in this adventure that was of note for you, Teos?
So this time we don't have sleeping guards. The guards are alert, and there is a lot more that steps up the danger level. Like if you go into, I think it's the lower level, you end up with 4 frost giants, 3 more in a room off of this. Maybe it's the upper level. I can never get them right. A small ice cave. If you make noises, icicles fall for 3 to 30 damage. My favorite, a hall where mutilated humanoids have been frozen in blocks of ice and sort of left as warnings to anybody who would invade. But you see they have treasure on them. And if you do detect magic, well, even magical treasure. So you might be thinking, what's the clear, obvious thing to do, right? Maybe it's like fireball or burning hands. Well, that will destroy all the treasure. So you could instead chip away at the ice. Sure, that'll work, but there's a 10% cumulative chance per block, that all the icicles fall on everybody, dealing 6 to 60 damage, right?
Yep. And we may have mentioned this before, but we're going to mention it again. AD&D had lots of battles with many creatures at high levels, like 12 ogres in a cave, very distinct for its era. You had to be very careful in how you tread through any of these encounters.
And the strict belief that hit dice varied, the monster manual declared the hit dice, but then you rolled. And so what we get stat-wise is some adventures would provide the stat block in a small line. In this series, they just give you hit points, right? Because it's so important to declare what you don't want to use average. So you get the string of, the 12 ogres, hero, the 12 hit points, some of them being, 3 times X, but there are all kinds of things. There are a misty room that is icy with a 2 in 6 chance that you fall. If you do, you might drop what you're holding. And if it isn't very big, there's a 1 in 4 chance that it falls in a crack and is gone forever. Okay. Right. That's probably your prized sword, your prized whatever.
Yep. You have your dagger of venom that you've had forever and love using. Well, you have a 33% chance that you will have a 25% chance of losing it. And You're very dexterous, doesn't matter.
Nope.
Uh, you know,
Yeah,
it's just the way
true.
it goes.
Yeah. But they're
Uh,
cool monsters here, right? Like all
yeah.
kinds of neat creatures in here.
Yeah, snow leopards, visiting hill, stone, and fire giants, winter wolves, remoras, white pudding. The lower area has two white dragons, ice toads, frost giant skeletons, polar bears, and then of course the Jarl with 5 visiting ogre magi who have been paid to fight against the human lands.
Very cool. And Jarl Grugner and his wife are formidable. They fight, and this happens often where the powerful giants fight as if they are higher giants. So they fight as if he was a cloud giant and she is a fire giant, plus many defenses and frost giants you faced before them. And then there's just an absolute ton of treasure. His private cavern, of course, holds a map to the fire giant's hall, and there is an escape tunnel that will teleport anyone to the third adventure.
Mhm. And so the third adventure, we get to the Hall of the Fire Giant King. As with the previous adventure, the characters might have teleported to this new location via magic that they found at the old. The adventure quickly notes that the characters will want to find a place where they can rest as they assault this new layer. And it gets very specific now. If they thrice venture forth from the cave to raid the fire giant hall, there is a 10% cumulative chance per additional raid that the hidey hole they choose will be found by the giants. So after their fifth raid, it's a 20%. After their sixth raid, it's 30%. So it spells out, right, regardless of what they do, this is just the numbers that were given. It was also cool that all the doors here, including the main doors, if you don't have fire giant strength, you can't open them unless you use magic of some kind. So if you have no one who can cast knock or have a magic item like a chime of opening, and no one has the fire giant strength, you just can't go through a door. Uh,
Yep.
yeah. But what that does is, again, it calls upon the players to figure things out, and you, as the game master, to be the referee to say, okay, you have given up enough resources, you have schemed your way through that I will allow it here. It's interesting in that way.
Yeah. And then there's
And
that
this
DM
is,
advice, right?
yeah, Gary Gygax speaks directly to the DM. As has been said in the previous adventures in this series, while considerable detail has been given, it is up to you to fill in any needed information and to color the whole and bring it to life. You, as the dungeon master, must continue to improvise and create, for your players will certainly desire more descriptions, seek to do things not provided for here, and generally do things which are not anticipated. The script is here, but you will direct the whole, rewrite parts, and set in final judgment on the character's actions. If you have already taken your players through the first 2 adventures, you will wish to be particularly mindful of how their behavior there will have altered what is shown here on each level matrix. Use the parameters to design your own epic. Be disinterested and be just. This is a very difficult scenario, and the players might rue thoughtless action. So it's all about thought, right? It's not about how powerful their characters are. It's about, did they think things through? But do not allow this to temper what you have before you. Likewise, do not set about to entrap the party in a hopeless situation. Allow their actions to dictate their fate. I thought that is very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that very different way of viewing things. And back then, I mean, we really took this to heart and we tried to do these kinds of things. I remember my DM that I began play with, he was a really nice guy, thankfully, but he would sort of do this disinterested concept, referee type concept that honestly made it less fun for us, right? And made it at times caused arguments and it was just really, it's like, why did that, what was the point of that? It's like, well, it just is, deal. And you're like,
yeah.
And if you've ever read one of those accounts from people back in the day, like DM David has one that I forget what magazine it appeared in, where he talks about, essentially a DM that feels like they're just taking out their aggression on you. And yet you have no other outlet in your small town. So you just put up with it, you're kind of being abused every week. while having fun because it's in this fantasy world and you want to win at the game, but you're not allowed to win, right? Because it's impartial. And yeah.
Because it's real life, quote unquote. So an example of what we're talking about is in the Fire Giant King's Hall, there are 4 tapestries up on the wall. 3 of the tapestries are just in front of the wall. The 4th tapestry covers an entrance to the private quarters of the king and the queen. And there's no make a perception check to know if you see this or roll it. It is just, if you don't pull back that particular tapestry, you do not know that this area is there. And there's a lot of treasure there. There's a lot of folks there. So that's sort of what we're looking at. And I also loved when you found the Queen Fruppy. When you come into her presence, she demands that you kneel to pay respect to her. All right. And I'm just trying to imagine characters that are like, okay, we're trying to sneak in, or, okay, yeah, we'll do this just to be respectful. And maybe we'll put one over on her, pretend that we're worshiping her. So when they kneel, she attacks immediately to great, according to the rules, advantage. Not that she has advantage, but she has a lot going for her if you kneel and she attacks.
What does that even mean?
Including if she rolls a natural 20 on an attack against a character that is kneeling, she decapitates them instantly. The end.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Can you imagine these days? Yeah.
Beautiful.
However, it is fun to look at the way that designers then tried to take these rules that they were resting on and make something more interesting than just the rules would say. Yeah. And that's something I think, as game designers should try to do, with the understanding we need to stay within the rules and within the zeitgeist of RPGs that we have at our disposal.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some neat things, right? Ombi, the dwarven advisor to King Snur, has long ago sworn to the side of the giants, but instead will try to say to you, I've been forced to, for the last 10 years, do their bidding. They're trying to attack the human lands. Help me stop them. If you allow me to get my armor and weapons, I will get my revenge on him. And he'll go into his room and, poison his stuff and get ready. And of course, attack you whenever they can and lead you into a trap and all of that.
Yeah. There's a room with a lock on the outside of the room. And so if you open it, go in, you see 3 Rakshasa who are both guests, but not guests. And so the guests is in quotes. It says they are guests, but they're barred in the room because the king does not trust them. Yeah. So the text literally says, naturally, the party entering will see the 3 creatures as trusted friends and associates. And I'm like, what does that even mean? That they're going to be friends and associates of the players, or that they're going to be friends and associates of the king? What is it that they think?
Yeah.
And it doesn't say who they are, what they're doing there. Nope. And so you, as the game master, have this tool to say, okay, well, maybe they are prisoners, but maybe they're not, but maybe they this, or maybe, and you could just sort of make it up as you go along, which can be great. And it also can be terrible depending on the game master.
Yep. Yeah, and there's some really clever kind of things, like there are various rooms where we get and if any ogres survived from previous adventures, they're here. If the hill giant chief survived, we even get a treasure chamber for him, I think, that sort of says move him over here in his treasure if he survived the first adventure, and the frost giants can be over here. It's kind of interesting. And there's some number of them anyway, but more if you add to them from whatever was survived before. And then, Shawn, share with us this absolute bizarre, feels like 3rd edition almost, King's Torturer and Headsman.
Yeah, there's a room where the king's torture and the king's headsman are like waiting around to be called on to torture and or behead someone. And when the characters run in an attack, there are these special moves given to these two monsters. So outside of their normal stat block, the headsman can sever limbs or decapitate based on a die roll. It's like, oh, out of this, there's a this percent chance that if they hit, they decapitate. Roll on this, and it's an arm if it's a 1, if it's a hand if it's a 2, it's a head if it's a 4, 5, or 6, right? And it's like, and then the torturer can, with 2 attack rolls. Now, there's no precedent for this in their stat block, right? It's just they attack. But this is if they roll a 2 hit, they can grab a character. And if they roll and succeed on a second 2 hit attack, they can throw them in the Iron Maiden and slam the door closed, doing 10 to 100. So basically 10d10 points of damage. And just to be clear, the pre-generated characters at the back of this adventure, one of them has a starting maximum hit point of 29. So 10 to 100 points of damage, you're likely going to kill that character. And the highest hit point one was 104. So, and most of them are in like the 60, 70 range.
Yeah. And you can get thrown down a well. And there's a whole thing of how they can throw he'll just throw endless numbers of characters down the well or something. It's really sort of, you're like, wow, okay, yeah. But I mean, that would probably be super interested when you're playing it back in that era, right? I actually played through this series, but I don't know that we made it. I think it fell apart before we made it through much of the fire giant area. I don't recall this battle at least, but yeah.
Yeah. And finally, the priest area. I read this and I was just like, okay, wow.
Oh yeah.
Because I read it and I was like, oh, cool. They have this huge inverted triangle with a Y enclosed in it, touching the sides of the triangle. I'm like, oh, that's Theriston. That's like the elder elemental god side. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Nice callback. But then I kept reading, like, oh no, they're all the way on this. They mentioned the tentacle rods that have become a big part of later adventures in D&D's history. So there's this altar there, and if the players touch it, there's a 1 in 12 chance of instant death with no saving throw. There's a 1 in 12 chance of insanity or rage. So insanity, you're just out of it. Rage, you actively attack your party members. Fright and weakness, where your strength is halved. Or age from 1 to 20 years. Now remember, in AD&D, age came at a cost. If you were a human and you were 40 and you aged 20 years and you were a fighter, your strength is going down, your constitution's going down, right? Now your intelligence and wisdom may go up, but that's something. And only the insanity and the rage could be removed with a remove curse. Wow. Now, if the players activate this altar and they are holding the tentacle rods, the first thing that happens is a tentacle comes out of the altar, grabs the, quote, nearest living creature and pulls it into the void, never to be seen again. No saving throw, no rolls. You're just gone. But appearing on the altar then will be an object that the characters desire most. Right? It's like, oh, we just lost Charlie, but look, we have a ring of 3 wishes. All right, hey, let's try that again. Let's bring bring a weasel from this other room over, and then like everybody, or like 1 to 6 characters get dragged into and killed.
If you try it again, you roll d12. On a 4 to 12, the Elder Elemental God ignores the whole thing. I love that write-up.
Right.
On a 1, seize and devour 1 to 4 more creatures, which I love because you're absolutely right. What we would have done is grab like a weasel or something. Well, surprise, because it might have grabbed 4 things, and then 3 of us are dead forever.
Yeah.
And does nothing good for you, right? Number 2 is strike everyone present totally blind and then not grant any desires. And 3 is raise the ability score of each character present by 1 in each category and take no sacrifice, right? Just so random.
So random. And we're talking about this as best of, and we're talking about how wild that was back then. But back then, that was the best of.
Yeah, it was.
Because it was completely out of the blue. It was both testing the players' guts, their greed, their ability to roll with punches. And sometimes we miss a little bit of that chaos
Mhm.
in subsequent editions, because chaos is not great for rules.
Yeah.
Right. You want rules. If your rules are chaotic, they are generally not good rules. Now, if your rules can successfully and fairly represent chaos, then you're doing a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing that is worth mentioning here, because it's big from a lore perspective, is there is a part where you stumble into, there are two parts where you stumble into drow, and one of them is Eclavdra, the drow priestess, and she not only has one of these tentacle rods, the greater tentacle rod, but also, she is clearly allied with these different elements. She's the reason all these giants have been allying. So this concludes your quest, finding out, oh, it's the drow behind it, right? Which is really important, but also important lore-wise, because this is the first statistical appearance. Drow had been described in the monster manual, and then later in the Fiend Folio we get statistics. But here, before the Fiend Folio, we get the first statistic, and we get something really about them where we get to see what they're like. And what we see them is manipulating, right? And so from the very beginning, we're this positioning of the drow in this way, which would remain such a classic piece, right? That the drow are pulling the strings, the strands of the web, right? Lolth is behind it. I mean, any number of adventures that we talked about out of the abyss, right? And Lolth is pulling the strands that drive that. And it's become a thing that keeps, the gift that keeps on giving, how these drow are placed here.
And it tells us that there's a river of lava on the bottom level that's blocking your way, but there are winches that will allow you to cross it, or move pack animals over it, or move yourself over it, or move goods over it. Beyond that passage, or beyond that river, are passages that lead into what we would now call the Underdark. And they would lead to further adventures like D1, Descent into the Depths of the Earth.
Very cool. And I remember we played that series as well. I think we jumped some of this series, but we played parts of this series, and we played D1, and then we played, Queen of the Demon Web Pits to be the huge conclusion. And I ran that too as well, which is the most of the memory I have about it is me DMing it. That was a wild adventure that also could just take forever if you ran with it. So yeah.
Yep.
Fascinating adventure. So incredible to think of this as being the first adventure ever, right? Like published at a time when Gary Gygax sort of begrudgingly felt he had to put out an adventure because We Warriors was doing it and others were talking about doing it. And he began to realize that his supposition that you needed no adventures because all DMs would just create their own. Wait, that's not right. And I guess I better get in on the market or others will take it from me. And so, this was the result, using tournament adventures to kind of move forward. Yeah.
Yep. And interesting to see what Gary thought was important for game masters to know, right? What notes were called out. And then, we still get this DM advice to this day. A lot of what Gygax said in this first adventure has been repeated through time and is still considered sort of wisdom for game masters going forward. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed fighting against the giants, and we thank you for listening, and we thank you for your support. You can support us also by going to patreon.com/masteringdnd and becoming a Master of Dungeon supporter. If you become a Master of Realm supporter, you get a shout out in our show notes, and you get some of this new content that we're creating. And if you become a Master of the Multiverse, well, you get that content, you get a shout out in our show notes, and you get your name mangled by me in real time. So thank you, Masters of the Multiverse, including Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, David Bastiansen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Boschan from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges Avalos, Robo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, That Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Kevin Davis, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted and Guyana of Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Simon the Hunter, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of the Twilight Perspective, J.T. Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Kiermandy, Schwill from Maine, Leftria, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Jaren from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Bengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Malley, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacle Squelching Wetly, Post-Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Joe Russo, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, David Rideout, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simos, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh and Libanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from Masters of Alchemy, Tres, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Vedwokles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Ian Wright. And Ian, we apologize for leaving you out of our show notes. We are glad you reached out, and you are now officially part of the team. And Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you to all our listeners and to all our patrons. Again, if you want to support us on our Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd. You can also help us out by leaving us a review wherever you listen to this podcast, or if you watch on YouTube, like and subscribe and comment and thumbs and do the stuff. So Teos, where can people find you on social media?
Find me at alphastream.org. You can get there to my videos where I broke down for episodes 1 and 2 of the Dungeon Masters actual play what I thought were valuable DM lessons to think about from those shows.
Mm-hmm. And you can find me on the socials at Sean Merwin, and follow the podcast on social medias at Mastering D&D. So Teos, we have survived the giants. What are we going to do now?
I think we have to try to find the way that despite our actual stats and who we are, we can fight as storm giants.
I would definitely sprain an ankle going toward leaving the inn. I would be lying on the ground outside, writhing in pain. That's where my adventuring career is at this point.
Yeah, fair.
Okay. Against the tendinitis is...
That's look for that next week for Patreon subscribers.